Today I take you backstage and give you a peek behind the curtain on what it's like to drum tech for a big band on a big festival tour. Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is Eli Green and I recently returned home from working the Australian Knotfest tour as a drum tech for my good friend Dan Furnari of Polaris. Now, if you're unfamiliar with Polaris, you probably don't listen to metalcore because they are fast becoming one of the biggest names in the genre, both at home here in Australia and also abroad. While followers of this channel know that I love to get into the nitty-gritty of drums and the technical side of them makes me very happy, it might surprise you to learn that I actually don't do a whole lot of drum teching gigs. And largely, that's by choice. Now, don't get me wrong, I love drum teching, but mostly I end up working in recording studios where I feel it's a little better suited to meticulously crafting a great drum sound, whereas live gigs tend to go hand in hand with more environmental issues and compromises. Awkward backstage areas, tight time frames to set things up, and noisy spaces often make the job feel like you're more like putting out fires than bringing out the best out of an instrument. But when a band like Polaris knocks on your door, whose drummer Dan and their amazing sound tech Lance are as big a nerds about drums as I am, who am I to say no to that? Especially on a festival tour headlined by none other than Slipknot. I mean, yeah, let's do it. Now, I did film a bunch of my time on tour with the band, but my first couple of days spent there were kind of spent focusing on making sure that I was doing the job right and I was delivering exactly what I was being paid for. So the footage is a little spotty. However, I made sure to capture an entire setup and show of the final Knotfest day in Sydney, which is Polaris's home city. So I'll get to that, but for now, let me catch you up on what happened to get to that point. I hopped on a plane to Wick Studios in Melbourne to catch up with the band on the last day of production rehearsals ahead of the first show. The whole band and crew was so lovely and welcoming, it made me feel at home immediately. They gave me the rundown on the backline equipment that we'd be using, and I got stuck into learning the drum recipe that Dan and Lance have cooked up over many tours and record cycles together. And this was a particularly exciting part of taking this gig, as Lance is one of the rare sound techs who not only tours with the band live, but is also responsible for the band's studio records. So you know that he has an intimate knowledge on Dan's sound and the best way to replicate it live. Now, these two had very specific notes and settings on how they run everything, and while I had some ideas on how I could build on what they had created, my priority for the first show was just to make sure that Dan was super comfortable, that his kit setup was as familiar to the production rehearsals as it possibly could be so that he could hit that first show with full confidence. And as well as that, to make sure that Lance was getting everything he needed out front, so the drums sounded great and all of the frequencies coming through those mics were consistent as they were in the rehearsals beforehand. The first show went off without a hitch, and with that one under my belt, I had some ideas to enhance the drum sound, which I was really happy to have the trust of Dan and Lance behind me to try these things out. Just change some tuning schemes up a little bit, see if I could get a little bit more size out of some of the drums. And much to my delight, the changes were super well received, and after the second show, I felt like we were really cooking with where the drum sound was at. The three of us were working really well together and everything was sounding great. So at that point, let's meet up with past Eli at the Sydney Knotfest show, where I'm going to take you through a full setup and show. So welcome backstage to Knotfest. First things first, let's put on some gloves because we're going to be handling a lot of gear and we want to keep our hands nice and fresh. This is my tech case, which houses all of my tools and bits and pieces. I try to keep this nearby while I'm building the kit, just in case I need to grab anything. The most important thing is the rug. It is critical that we get this sitting flat and square on the riser, as it's what everything is going to be built on, as we've marked the placements of every stand and pedal with tape during production rehearsals to make sure they stay where they need to be from show to show. Now let's uncase these beautiful drums. We're using a gorgeous Pearl Masters Maple Complete from Deluxe Hire. It's a 6-ply maple finished in piano black with a nice little silver center stripe along the middle. The sizes are 12 by 8, 14 by 14, 16 by 16, and 22 by 18. I nest all the drum cases inside the bass drum case to save some space, but there's actually another reason for this, which we'll come back to later. The snare that we're using on this run is Dan's rolled bronze Everett snare. This thing is heavy as hell and has seen many tours. I roll the hardware case close by to save some trips and get to cleaning up these drums. By the time the shells come off the stage with Dan's shredding sticks all over them, they are covered in dust. Plus, this is a hometown show, so we want them looking nice and sharp.
Thanks, bro. Appreciate it.
Shout out to Jesse for bringing me some water. It was so humid up there. I think he could see that I was struggling and didn't want me falling over. Now, I don't have a huge amount of time for a clean, but a quick wipe with a cloth and a rub down with some Vader drum polish gets these shells looking a lot nicer than they did. Time to grab some stands. I start with the tripod that holds the rack tom and the floor tom legs so I can get them all in position. The full tom legs are all memory locked in position, but to remember which leg goes in which bracket, we have a system where leg 1 corresponds with the left of the badge when the drum is upside down, and then 2 and 3 are clockwise from there. Now to get Dan's pedals in place. He's using his DW5000s on this run, and they are in need of a total teardown service, but we didn't want to change them out at the last second because he was super comfortable with them and they were working totally fine, so we felt confident enough to power through with them. We marked the outside of where the beaters touched the bass drum head so we could make sure that the pedal was perfectly aligned and sitting flat. Usually this takes me a couple of goes to get lined up, but today it was first try. Time to get the snare in position, but first a quick rub down. This snare also needs a full teardown service as it's seen many battles, but I've been doing my best to just clean it up little by little each show and get it looking great again, despite it having some marine life living on the hoops.
Look at this shit, barnacles.
Now that the core of the kit is in place, it's time to build out the other stands. A little bonus mic stand for Jamie. I guess you can put vocal tech on my resume now, right? Some sandbags now for the stands that like to move around a bit more, and now it's time to place all these stands in position. The combination of memory locks plus all the tape marks we put on the stands ensures that no matter what, the stands end up in the same place every single setup. It makes setup a breeze, but also keeps Dan in a good headspace, knowing that his gear is where he wants it to be. And we all know what it's like as drummers to not be sure if a stand is in exactly the right place or where you had it in rehearsal beforehand. So it just eliminates that extra layer of anxiety. Now for the cymbals. Firstly, the China, the 19-inch Zildjian A Custom Ultra Hammond. The bottom of Dan's stack, the 18-inch K Special Extra Dry China. The splashes are a 10-inch A Custom EFX splash and a 9-inch Oriental splash. Dan's hi-hats are a cool combo of a 14-inch A Custom Master Sound bottom with a K top. For crashes on this run, we were using a 19-inch K paper thin on the left and a 20-inch K paper thin on the right, and the ride is a 21-inch K sweet ride. Now Dan likes his cymbals tightened down just a little more than I do, so I test their swing while I'm setting them up and try to remind myself to just go a little bit further than I usually would to get them in the right spot. You can see we have a few extra cymbal cases along with us. One case is for spare cymbals and the other is for spare drum heads. I'll grab the stage fan while I'm here, and the kit is more or less built at this point, now just for some finishing touches. Sandbagging the China and the stack stand is critical, as that thing will literally walk itself off stage otherwise. Now to sort through the sticks to find the pairs that sit in the stick holder. Dan likes to have a bunch on hand on both sides of the kit and one extra on top of the bass drum just in case of emergencies. Now, Polaris haven't always brought drum techs on the road with them, so Dan has his own tech box which lives on stage with him that also houses his talkback mic and push-to-talk switch so he can communicate with the rest of the band and crew during the show. Time for a quick angle check. We actually wrote down the degrees that Dan likes his drums at using the iPhone Measure app in rehearsals, so if anything has moved during transport, I can adjust it as needed. I like to give Lance a hand getting the triggers and mics in place, not just for his benefit, but also once they're in place, I can start tuning. Which seems kind of backwards, as most of the time you would tune the drums before getting to this point, but I learned extremely quickly that with Polaris, all these triggers and mics sitting on top of the hoops make such a huge difference to the resonance of Dan's drums that tuning without them on there is kind of pointless. They make such a massive difference that the short and punchy tom sounds have genuinely become part of Dan's sound at this point. A quick reminder of the frequencies that I'm shooting for, and now the trickiest part of the day, tuning with the TuneBot while Hatebreed is playing behind me. So the TuneBot reads any sound on the microphone here, so as you can imagine, having a full line array 6 meters from the drum riser makes it very difficult to get the initial readings. But once I get a read that's in the range that I know the drum tuning to be at, I use the filter button to isolate that range, and the TuneBot is now listening to it, and it's much easier from there. Once everything is dialed in, I fit the closest tension rods on each drum with rock locks and lock these suckers down. Also for Lance's benefit, I've been removing the plastic that we keep on the sky gels during transport. If you leave them on, you can hear this super high-pitched plasticky clack sound through the mics. So I keep them safe in this box and put them back on afterwards to keep them from getting messy during transport. Now for a quick walkthrough with the boss for his approval.
Hello.
With the thumbs up from Dan, I set about setting up his warm-up rig. Firstly, by laying down the small carpet and then proceeding to build his little Pearl bass drum practice pad up. Annoyingly, it doesn't fit in the case with everything else in it, so I have to set it up and dismantle it every single time just to get it to pack down properly. Dan's yoga mat is a must for his pre-show stretch routine. We have a second set of DW5000s for Dan to warm up with on the pad, as well as his reflex pad to get the hands moving. This little space proved really important for Dan to not only get warmed up, but by being able to be on stage and feel the energy of the band and the crowd, helped him get in the right headspace so he could get out there and hit the ground running when showtime came. With changeover approaching, some last additions, some towels, a set list, and pre-cracking his drinks, as well as the backup snare, were looking pretty good. Changeover now. Time to get on ears in case of comms from the rest of the crew. Now my favourite part of the day, getting wheeled out on stage by the Knotfest crew. Time to build out my little station back here by the step and then deliver Dan his in-ears. I mentioned before that the bass drum case would be relevant again. You can see here that the case is being used as a seat for Dan to use on his warm-up rig. Why? Because I measured it, and it was exactly the same height as his seat. Now we raised the height of the drum riser between the first and second show of the run, so we've been using the case that Dan stores his pedals in as an extra step up to help us get on and off the riser. Time for a line check. You can't hear it, but I have Lance in my ears asking me which drums and mics to hit. Bad crowd. While Slaughter to Prevail are on next door, Dan jumps up for a last minute check and just soak in the vibes on stage.
That snare change you made in Brisbane sounded so much better.
Sounds good.
That drop in bottom.
Just gives it a bit of oomph.
It's like, yeah, you're 100% right. It's exactly what was missing.
Yeah, cool.
It's still, top still feels good.
With the all clear from Big D, it's showtime. Thankfully, this show went off without a hitch. Only once did I have to jump up and fix a mic that had wobbled loose, but otherwise I got to sit back and just enjoy the Dan show. So here's a couple of my favorite moments. that point, things get boring. All that was left to do was to pack everything back up, stick it back in the truck, and head back to the hotel. But not before establishing dominance over Johnny from Health.
I don't know.
No, you look tough. You look tough.
Ready?
Go.
Go.
The chairs off the ground, the chairs off the ground. Come on, Johnny.
Tough. Oh, no! No! Oh, no! He's tough! He's tough! We're gonna be here all night. That was sick, bro.
Nice work.
So this ended up being one of the most fun tours that I've ever been a part of. Honestly, it was an absolute blast. I want to say a huge thank you to Dan and the rest of Polaris and their amazing team. It was such a pleasure to be invited and be so warmly welcomed into the family there. It was definitely over way too soon, and I really hope to get out there with the band again down the line. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more Drum Tech Diaries just like this, let me know in the comments. I can definitely do more of them when the opportunities arise. And if you really liked what you saw, subscribe to the channel, but also really consider supporting us over on Patreon. It's just $5 USD a month. You get access to early release and extra content, as well as access to all the drum samples that I make for all these videos over on YouTube. So if that sounds good to you, head over there, check it out. It really does go a very long way into ensuring that I can make more of these videos. Otherwise, see you on the next one.